I wouldn't call myself a Porsche-phile, but have tremendous respect for the 911, what Porsche has done with it over decades, and their purity of purpose in that car, and iteration after iteration. But seeing a Porsche 911 reimagined by Singer was an entirely new experience as well. For example, we're taking a Type 964 911, which people will be familiar as the last swing axle 911. But as we're reimagining that, we're actually bringing it closer in shape to the original G-body 911, because that was an appearance that Porsche files really loved. But optimizing the proportions of that, and Rob is the master of this, right? His eye for optimizing what's unmistakably a 911, but finessing it and optimizing it so it's even more beautiful than the original. Certainly from the exterior, the cars are gorgeous. You open up the door and then look at the interior, and it's another aha moment. And so it's not just artists on the exterior that are working on the bodies, but it's artists on the seats, and artists on the consoles, and artists on the steering wheels. And I don't say anything goes, because we still do want to stay true to it being a 911, but some of the things that have been done on the interiors of the vehicles to make it a client's own is pretty special. Hi, this is Raj Nair. This is Cars and Culture with Jason Stein.
Great to be reunited with a guy who I used to see on a regular basis, and I'm so happy who is now at the epicenter of, I would say, car culture in a very special way. Raj, welcome to the program. Thanks for being on SiriusXM.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's great to see you again, Jason.
Great to be with you. Let's talk about where you are. I mean, you have you've traded your Midwest presence for a very interesting new locale. You now have a beach in your address. I mean, life is good for you. Singer. What? Let's just talk about it to get it going. Where did the idea come from for you to join Singer, and how long ago?
Yeah, I guess it's been a topic of discussion for, a middle of last year or so, maybe even a little bit earlier. Obviously knew of Singer, just, being in the industry, being a car guy. It's, got such a great reputation. Where I was at the time, Multimatic was actually a supplier to Singer. So we were supplying them parts and carbon fiber, and had done some engineering and prototype work for them. And it was the right time for me and Multimatic, and for Singer. The stars just kind of aligned that it made sense to make a move and see how it could help Singer move to the next level.
What is it that drew you to Singer?
So when the first time I physically saw a Singer, and obviously I'd heard a lot about him, but it makes such a big difference when you see one in the flesh, was at Goodwood. And I didn't get a chance to drive or anything like that, but just seeing the vehicle on the stand. And you and I have been in the business a while, and we kind of know what to look for relative to craftsmanship and quality. And the level of quality in that vehicle, the level of craftsmanship, the level of attention to detail, was something I hadn't seen before. And obviously, I wouldn't call myself a Porsche-phile, but have tremendous respect for the 911, what Porsche has done with it over decades, and their purity of purpose in that car, and iteration after iteration. But seeing a Porsche 911 reimagined by Singer was an entirely new experience as well. And so I think the combination of those two, I was really drawn to the product. And then as I got to know the company better, as I got to know Maz Fawaz, who's now leading strategy for us, and Rob Dickinson is the founder, and our executive chairman, and leads design. As I got to know those guys, it was, there was definitely camaraderie there. And it's great to be working at a place where you feel like you're working with friends. And so yeah, after a couple of dinners and more than a couple of bottles of wine, we were just able to make it work. And I joined the company in January. So really been enjoying it since then.
Did you know much about Singer before seeing that vehicle in the flesh?
I did. Both learning about them, but also when we were a supplier to them and doing some of the prototype work for them, as well as supplying some
At Multimatic.
carbon fiber to them, which Multimatic has significant carbon fiber capability and engineering and prototyping capability. And so I knew a little bit about the transition they were going to, knew a lot about their quality expectations, which are extremely high. Knew a bit about the business that they were in because of Multimatic and that company's history building the Ford GT, building the Mercedes AMG 1. So was familiar with the transition it takes from moving from only building 10 vehicles per year, or race vehicles or high performance vehicles, and scaling that up to still a very small number by industry standards, but 200 a year or so. That's a big difference, and it's a big transition for any company to go through. It's a big transition that Multimatic went through, and so yeah, I knew a lot about the company, as well as I had a pretty good idea of the opportunities and challenges that they were facing.
The opportunity is that you're part of something that in the car culture world, if you know, you know, right? I mean, it, eyes light up for those who do know when you mention Singer.
Yeah.
They've got influencers and tastemakers and interesting individuals who want to acquire one. It's really a fabric of its own making, isn't it?
Yeah, the company doesn't spend $1 on paid advertising, right? So
Right.
it's all, if you know, you know. It's word of mouth. It's our customers, obviously. It's people who've seen the car at Goodwood or Monterey. And there's not that many around, right? It's very, very low volume, very exclusive, a very long order bank. We've got 3 years of orders for us to build. But the reputation almost transcends that, right? What they've been able to do in reimagining the 911, the attention to detail, this mantra that everything is important. You won't find many vehicles built to that level, and I think whether you're in the industry or whether you're a car aficionado, or if you're a Porsche file, you understand what it takes to build low volume vehicles. All of that. Singer has such a great reputation that it's a great place to be.
Yeah, truly. Let's go back to your days at Ford, if we could, for a minute,
Sure.
because you mentioned Multimatic, but we'll go back just one step further. You did some landmark. You had landmark moments there. GT, Mustang, Raptor, right?
Yeah.
That you were all a part of. Did you ever imagine your path would lead you to boutique Porsche restorations?
No, no. That was, 30 years at Ford, even my path within Ford, I never, imagined, having the privilege of leading product development there and then, leading North America as a business unit. And, just the privilege of leading great teams and great people that those teams building some products that, we're exceptionally proud of. And you name some of them, certainly the sixth gen Mustang, the Ford GT, the all aluminum F-150, the Raptors, building up Ford Performance, getting the motorsport side and racing side and engineering side back together again. Yeah, all of those were fantastic moments. But relative to this particular area, it was probably that Ford GT program, both the 2005 program and the 2016 program that introduced me to this particular aspect of the business, this high performance, ultra low volume vehicle. And that's what I'd worked with Multimatic before, but that Ford GT program with Multimatic led to that partnership as well. So, um,
Yeah,
So
in some
that
ways,
step kind of made sense.
yeah.
And really, 80% of Multimatic's business is actually high volume supply to Ford. Whether it's not to Ford, just Ford, Ford and GM and Stellantis and BMW and Ferrari. But whether it's suspension components or structures and tailgate steps, control arms, all of that, that's the main business. And 20% was the motorsports and low volume business. Um, so it made, my involvement there made a lot of sense and just a fantastic team there. Really enjoyed my 7 years at Multimatic and they're in great hands now with Rick Chapka, who's taken over from my role as a COO and president, and they've got an incredibly bright future ahead of them. But that then led into to Singer, right? The build of the Ford GT. Uh, we had a plant in England. Multimatic has a plant in England building Mercedes AMG 1, so another very high performance, low volume program. They're up and starting the Mustang GTD now as we speak. So that experience led to something that made sense, where I felt I could provide value to Singer, and thankfully they agreed. So happily joined the team.
Well, in some ways too, thinking it through and just listening to you, you've been part of those iconic vehicles that I just mentioned. You're on an iconic vehicle now in a different way. In some ways, the path just leads there. I mean, you weren't doing minivans. I mean, I know you were in charge of minivans, but
Yeah.
your stamp was on iconic vehicles, and your stamp is within the world of an iconic vehicle now, and an
Yeah, I
iconic
mean,
restoration.
yeah, particularly when you put it that way, you think back on the vehicles that I've had the privilege of working on, and there aren't too many more iconic than a Porsche 911 or a Ford Mustang.
Right.
And
Or a
and
GT
and if
or
you're
a
a
Raptor.
truck fan, a Ford F-150,
Yep.
and if you're a race fan, a Ford GT, GT40, and the eventual Ford GTs and road cars. So yeah, it's I'm sure on reflection when I have a chance to think about it, it'll be wow, that was really really lucky.
What's the shift like mentally, emotionally when you go from Ford to Multimatic to Singer, to go from overseeing millions of units to overseeing one car at a time?
It's really interesting. Ford is again a great company and 110 years old or 113, I guess. Um, and the structure of the business to be able to build one a minute is
Hmm.
such an incredible industrial orchestra that needs to be coordinated with
Hmm.
everything fitting together. So it can certainly feel very bureaucratic at the time, anytime you're in a large OEM, right? But if you realize everything that has to go right to be able to build a project as complex as that, at one a minute, you understand why all these things need to work together. When you're building one a day, and you're building to a performance or quality level that's a little bit different, it's obviously a very different approach. But some of the themes still apply. And I liken it to, it's reasonably well established how big OEMs work to build one a minute. It's reasonably well established how garages and motorsport shops work to build a race car, 4 race cars a year, or, maybe 10 if you're lucky. It's not as well established about how do you do one a day. And it requires a blend of both of those. And I was really lucky from my time at Ford and then working with Multimatic and learning with Multimatic together about finding that sweet spot of what processes do you want to bring in that are kind of like you would use for any, major car program at a big OEM, but what process do you want to bring in from when you're building a race car, right? And you need to be nimble, you need to be fast, you need to be flexible, you need to take the performance and quality levels up, a stage to the nth degree. And finding the right blend, even from my time at Ford and at Multimatic, it took a while to find that sweet spot, not too hot, not too cold. And
Hmm.
that's a little bit of what we're now bringing Singer up to from, an incredible uh, delivery of a vehicle relative to the 911, the classic by Singer and the turbo by Singer. But it was moving from doing that in a garage and almost a super hot rod shop, which I think, Rob would agree with, to a little bit more structure in order to be able to build at the volumes that we're talking about, which are still very low and very exclusive by automotive standards, but it is different than just a garage one-off build.
What's been the biggest adjustment for you?
Oh, well, I think California is a big adjustment. um,
Yeah.
and the California vibe. And Singer definitely is at the center of California car culture, which I obviously was exposed to. And at Ford, we had our studio in California, but just
That's right.
being there and feeling it, it's a real thing. Um, and there's a special and different way that Californians love their cars, and that is imbibed into Singer. The 911 is so iconic and without a doubt it's so German, right? I mean, Porsche
Right.
is that iconic German company, and their approach to the iterations of that vehicle are very Germanic, and their attention to detail. And applying California car culture to a 911 and seeing how that happened and is happening is, yeah, it's definitely adjustment because, as you said, I really am a Midwest boy at heart. I may not look it, but born and raised in St. Louis, and then most of my career in the Michigan area. Although I was lucky with Ford to be working in Europe twice, and in Thailand and China. It was always coming back to Dearborn eventually. Multimatic is a Canadian company, but obviously big presence in Canada and Toronto, but global, big presence in Detroit. Um, Ford, GM, Stellantis are their biggest customers. So still a very Midwestern based approach to the business. And the California approach is a little bit different. And it's a little bit more artistic. It's a little bit more free flow. And I used to say I went from being, um, one of the rebels and maybe, certainly one of the more rebellious executives at Ford to being the most conservative guy at Multimatic. And I am definitely the most conservative guy at Singer, so, even on another scale. So, but it's a great team, and we really enjoy each other. And to me, I've just been very lucky, whether it was at Ford or Multimatic, to be surrounded by great people and just enjoying going to work and working with them.
What's your mission at Singer? What are you trying to do?
So, obviously we're so focused on reimaginations of 911s, and on a day-to-day basis, we just spend all day on how can we do that better and how can we build it with higher quality? How can we really knock their socks out with an emotional design reimagination of 911? Um, but I do think that the company is also moving to the brand is really starting to stand for something. The Singer approach is starting to stand for something, and maybe even going beyond just the reimagination of 911. So we recently announced the partnership with Willow Springs and Harbor Capital, who's now bought the Willow Springs Raceway, and iconic track. Um, the oldest track out in the West, but certainly needed some investment. And so we obviously have a California reputation. The grassroots, the development of the cars that Rob and Maz have done have been because of miles and miles spent at Willow Springs. Um, but also our luxury brand reputation and be able to bring that to an opportunity at Willow Springs. So we have a vision of that being still incredibly accessible for grassroots racing and grassroots track days and the whole greater Los Angeles or West Coast California area being able to continue to use Willow Springs while at the same time creating a club and a true luxury experience that eventually residents there could enjoy. And so that's almost Singer, right? This ultra luxury reimagination of an icon that still is incredibly accessible and understandable by any car aficionado. And I think our brand stands for that a little bit. And I think there's a lot of opportunities beyond just reimagination of Line 11 that could be in our future with that approach.
And I know that the desire is to, I've talked to Maz on this program. I've talked to Rob a few years ago, even. Um, I know that the desire is to keep it very bespoke, very contained, very small, very exclusive. There's a fine line, right? Go back to my earlier comment about how many units that you used to oversee. There is the desire in the auto industry repeatedly make more, more, and more because the measurement of success is based on volume, scale, and more. But you've got to fight that while satisfying the public so that the wait time doesn't get too long, right? And
Yeah.
also by not diluting the brand. There's a like that balance has got to be in your head at all times.
Yeah. And I think even more so in our heads, I think, the rule always is, build one less than the demand.
The
But
Ferrari
I think
example.
our
Yeah.
approach has to be even more restrictive on that and stay true to that. I don't, in some ways it's more a matter of how many of a specific vehicle are you going to build? And so I see our volumes. I think our new announcement on a 911 Carrera with a naturally aspirated engine. Back in the day, Porsche offered that iconic turbo bodywork, but with a naturally aspirated engine. That was the Carrera, and we're reimagining that now. That'll be 100 units.
Mm.
Um, so our production capability, wanting to ramp that up a little bit, to that 200, 250 units a year eventually is probably going to be a good sweet spot for us. But probably more importantly, within that, the models that we would build, maintaining that we're really talking about lifetime volumes in the hundreds, certainly not ever getting to a thousand or anything like that. So that bespoke aspect, the ultra high luxury aspect, the exclusivity aspect, the pricing discipline aspect. It's important for us that we obviously sell the vehicles at a fair price, but they're not going to depreciate as soon as you accept delivery, right? They're going to maintain or even appreciate on volumes. And so you probably are not buying a Singer for an investment, but if you have to convince your significant other to buy a Singer, a
Mm. Yeah.
911 reimagined by Singer, you can certainly say that you're not going to lose money on that, on a reimagination by Singer.
You've said the word reimagine a number of times. It's more than just branding, isn't it, Raj? It's kind of a
It is.
global worldview. What does it mean internally?
So it's obviously there's an aspect of renovation that's been in the industry for a long time, just bring the car back to original. There's been a more recent trend to restomodding of taking these classic vehicles but putting new technology in them, where it's a new crate engine or a new suspension. I think what Singer does is the next level of beyond that, which is why we call it reimagination, right? It's still a 911. We strip it down to its bare metal, but then we do to some extent reimagine that body with entirely new bodywork. Sometimes carbon fiber bodywork to reduce the weight. But for example, we're taking a Type 964 911, which people will be familiar as the last swing axle 911. But as we're reimagining that, we're actually bringing it closer in shape to the original G body 911, because that was an appearance that Porsche files really loved. But optimizing the proportions of that, and Rob is the master of this, right? His eye for optimizing what's unmistakably a 911,
Mm.
but finessing it and optimizing it so it's even more beautiful than the original. Um, Underneath the car, we spent a lot of time improving the dynamics of the vehicle. And not for lap times, we're not out there to set a new lap record anywhere. But we are there to make a real emotional connection with the driver and a real pure, positive emotional response in driving this vehicle. That the best test is does it bring a smile to your face, right?
Mm.
That you will never measure on a stopwatch. And so that's why it's certainly much more than just renovating the car. It's actually much more than resto-modding a car. That's why we use that term reimagination of what a 911 can be. And it's an homage to that iconic car, the 911, and that iconic company, Porsche. But with our approach and our really low volumes and frankly a price point that's significantly higher, it's what could be with that vehicle.
And I imagine that storytelling is just as important as metal and mechanics, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Both the story and I would say the journey that we go through with our customers as well. Um, Obviously our customers are 911 fans, right? So
Yeah.
they know the vehicles. A lot of them, the one that resonates with them is when they were a certain age, when they were the teenager, and what poster did they have up on their wall. And so that storytelling of where we want to go together, reimagining their particular vehicle, when we take their donor vehicle and start the path of what should we do, and how can we make this your vehicle and your commission. And many of our owners our clients who we provide services to tell you that the day that that 2 to 3 year wait in finally getting their vehicle is a fantastic day, but it's also a little bit bittersweet because it's the end of the journey that they really enjoyed with us so much,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
why so many of them come back and say, let's do another journey. Let's do another. I love my classic. Now let's do that with the turbo. I love my turbo. Now let's do that with a DLST, and or let's do that with our newest offering, a 911 Carrera coupe. So it really is the story that we're telling together and the journey that we go on together with our clients.
And can you take us through that client journey? What does it look like when I raise my hand and say, "Okay, I'd like to be part of that journey"? And what are the nuances and changes and subtleties that exist on along that path?
Yeah, so one of the subtleties is we actually don't sell cars, we sell services, right?
Right.
And so some of our customers have a 911, a Type 964 or 911. That's what we work on. And so we'll take that as what we call the donor car. Some of them don't have that, so we obviously have a good expertise in finding a good donor car for them, and so we'll work them to get that donor car. Unfortunately, the next period is a wait.
Yeah.
So, because we have that very big order bank and we want to keep our volumes at that right level. We want to have the right people and the right technicians and the right artists to be working on the car and don't want to fall into the trap of growing bigger and the car being sacrificed because of that, the quality or the workmanship around it. So yeah, there is a weight, and we are trying to reduce that, but it does come with the territory a little bit. Then at a point in time, we'll start discussing the spec of the vehicle. And one of the things about a 911 by Singer is there's literally no two alike.
Right. Right.
There is a limit to what we can customize, but there's not much of one. Certainly not in colors, not in trim. Certain options that we can do. But those aspects become very personal. That's why we call them commissions. And particularly and you'll know this, Jason, certainly from the exterior, the cars are gorgeous. You open up the door and then look at the interior, and it's another aha moment.
Mm.
And so it's not just artists on the exterior that are working on the bodies, but it's artists on the seats and artists on the consoles and artists on the steering wheels. And I don't say anything goes because we still do want to stay true to it being a 911. But some of the things that have been done on the interiors of the vehicles to make it a client's own is pretty special. We can phase that spec process. We can obviously, we start obviously with the paint color first while we could still be working on the interior with the client refining that. But at a point in time, we'll freeze that down as well. While this is all happening, we're disassembling that donor car, stripping it down to bare metal, bringing it into our fabrication shop, stitch welding the entire vehicle to improve the weld integrity. In many cases, adding reinforcements and improve the torsional capability of the body in white. Then it moves into our body fabrication shop where, as I said, the panels, many of them carbon fiber, are custom fitted to each individual body, and to a level of detail on flushness and margins that are a level beyond anything you'll see anywhere else, in my opinion. Into our paint shop, with custom paints, custom tri coats. The number of coats is significantly higher than what you'll see in any other vehicle. We've been known to have some vehicles with up to 8 coats or more of paint to achieve the
Hmm.
effects that we want.
Wow.
We then, because of that level, will actually let that car cure for a longer period of time than most. That adds to this wait time. And so, we're talking about weeks of curing, whereas other places, may wait a day or a week. And then coming into our general assembly where the real magic is happening on installation of all those improvements to the powertrain, improvements to the gearbox, as well as all of these custom interiors. And then a pretty significant quality check process, full drive of the vehicles, full shakedown of the vehicles, and then eventual delivery to the customer. Depending on what vehicle we're talking about, yeah, that can, um, just even from, beyond the point of committing a vehicle to you, a commission to you, your process where you're actually engaging with us on what the vehicle wants to be can easily be a 2-year process. And so you can imagine the excitement that builds up during that time frame until the final delivery of the dream that you had imagined, and our privilege in being able to provide that to you.
It's a little different than one vehicle a minute.
It is. It is. Um, it is, but I want to, I don't want to discount the passion that those guys
Yeah,
at Blue Oval have for that as
both
well.
sides.
Right.
Both
Yeah.
sides.
And they have a passion to make that available to everyone. And,
Right.
and so the amount of heart that goes into an F-150, don't discount. There's a lot of heart that goes into a 911 reimagined by Singer, but there's a lot of heart that goes into an F-150 as well. There's a lot of heart that goes into a Ford GT and a Mustang GTD and all of that. So between
This is
Ford and Multimatic and Singer, I would say that's one thing that I've been privileged to be around people that had a passion for the business. So.
But you're in the sweet spot of exactly where you need to be, Raj. I mean, what you just described to me in the customer journey is an engineer's dream.
It is. And like I said, those few moments that I get to take a step back, I am incredibly lucky that I was trained by the best at Ford on what high volume and processes look like. I was trained by Peter Chapka at Multimatic, the founder of Multimatic, of how you run a company that size and how to stay nimble and hungry and decentralize and have the lowest possible level making decisions, have them feel accountable for the business. I was lucky to be with Multimatic while we learned this process of how to build at one a day, which is different than one a minute, but it's also different than one a year. And just feel lucky to be able to bring that to Singer, with my experience, but also be able to work with people like Maz and Rob. And I am definitely one of those guys. Some guys will say, I obviously had the talent and the brains and all of that. I didn't have any of that. I was just really lucky to be working with a lot of great people and mentors, and that taught me a lot. And I'm now lucky enough to be able to share that knowledge with some great people.
You and I haven't seen each other in a while. And since you are no longer working for a large OEM, I have to ask you a couple of industry questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Um, what is going on in the EV world right now? I, you know, there's been such an enormous push, and I'm not. This is not a political question, but it is a product question because you're a product guy.
Yeah.
Um, do consumers just not appreciate EVs yet? Is the chicken and the egg with infrastructure? What's your view on it? And if you were sitting in your former role, would you be scratching your head going, well, I guess we'll switch out to hybrids now?
Well, I mean, as you know, Jason, I'm a big hybrid fan,
Yeah. Yeah.
and hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and EVs. You know, I don't know if my hindsight's 2020 on this, but from an engineering point of view, um, the first thing I will say, and this isn't, from Singer or from Ford or Multimatic, this is just Raj.
Yeah. Right.
I personally do believe that climate change is a very real threat, and there's a lot of good scientists at Ford that did a lot of good work and came to the same conclusion. A lot of good scientists everywhere come to that conclusion. So the need to reduce greenhouse gases is real. The automotive industry's responsibility within that is real. But it's a very complex equation on how to get there. And consumer taste is one aspect, engineering capability is another aspect, and the economics is certainly an aspect. I always felt like the consumer acceptance of an EV, that challenge was never about how the vehicles drove. Anyone who's been in an EV,
Yeah.
um, I've yet to hear someone first time they've gotten an EV that said that was worse than I expected, right? Most
Mhm.
of them are surprised how well they drive, how fun they are to drive, how quiet they are. So the acceptance of an EV by the consumer or just on the attributes of what a vehicle needs to do, I think was always overstated. The range aspect is real. And particularly for those who are not just doing a daily commute, the range is fine for the daily commutes. And if you have somewhere to charge, it's no more inconvenient than charging your phone, right? If you don't, if you're parking on the sidewalk or the street, then it's a different challenge. But those aspects of range anxiety on long trips and the recharge time is real. Um, and so that's the aspect of what engineers need to figure out and how to improve. But the economic aspect is also real in that still, the batteries are still much cheap or becoming much cheaper than they were, but the economics for the consumer of what you save on fuel, on gas per week versus the incremental cost of the EV, still doesn't make sense. Now, do I think consumers are doing that math? Probably not. But do I think in a secondary way they get it and they've been able to figure out this doesn't quite make economic sense for me? Yeah. In the end, the economics never goes away.
Yeah.
And so I do think that you've come on this point when the incentives aren't there to fund it. Um, the economics eventually catch up to the pure EVs. What I do think what gets lost in this is how good the hybrids and plug-in hybrids are. They're complex, they're hard to do, they're even harder to explain to a consumer. But reducing your greenhouse gas footprint, not having a compromise on range and refuel, particularly a plug-in hybrid, if your commute is in that 35-mile range, you probably can find a plug-in hybrid that is going to be on battery for most of its drive cycle.
Yep.
And for me as an engineer, it's hard to see that technology there and not be as supported because it's not a pure EV. It still does have internal combustion engine. But if I were to look at the combination of the economics and the engineering and the consumer challenges, there's a category and a technical solution that could do a lot of good for the planet.
One more industry question, and then we'll wrap up on Singer. The Chinese. I mean, when you look at what's happening in other parts of the world, in other markets, They're clearly not in this market, and they're not in the Canadian market, but they're in every other market. Um, they're offering affordable, attractive, well engineered vehicles. Is it only just a matter of time before those products um, come in and alter the landscape of the automotive world here traditionally, as we've known it, especially given average transaction prices of north of $50,000 now, and
Yeah,
no entry level vehicles.
yeah. I mean, it's a trap you can fall into. The margins on your higher end vehicles are more attractive, and you start abandoning the entry level vehicles and cars altogether, perhaps. And the Chinese are well placed for all the reasons that you just said to step into that. I think there are aspects in their model that were, certainly, state subsidies on the surface and below the surface played into increasing their capability, increasing their capacity. But on the product front right now, they're putting out some very fine vehicles.
Mm,
And on the quality levels, the engineering levels, the technology levels, in some cases, particularly the entry levels, at an availability of technology that's not on any entry level vehicle other than from China. So yeah, I do think, whether you want to call it a threat or a new player, it is here to stay. Um, Eventually, that economically, they're going to have to stand on their own 2 feet. I think there are still some, hidden subsidies and hidden support that is propping up the business to some extent, but not nearly the extent of a decade ago or longer, right? The key will be a little bit of this global market, and obviously a lot of things changing every single day on
mhm.
even have a global market anymore. Um, but they've got a lot of capacity and a lot of markets that are not closed to them that can support that business. When it starts coming into North America, to some extent, it's already in Mexico. Um, but U.S. and Canada, it certainly will not be the quality of the vehicles that keeps them out, but it may be other trade factors.
Right. Singer and what's to come. You come from a world of, as you've just said, next gen propulsion and other, a reimagination of what some of those products look like from your past. Singer's got an analog soul, right?
Yes.
How does Singer reimagine itself as mobility changes, or does it stay an analog soul?
Um, as much as, the engineering head in me, and particularly as Chief Technical Officer Ford, loved working on those EV solutions, loved working on the autonomous vehicle solutions, loved working on new technologies. That's not what Singer's about. You're right. We are an analog car. We are the Rolex mechanical watch versus the Apple
Yeah.
Watch, right? And
Yeah.
and so will we work really hard on improving the analog reimaginations of 911, and will we, improve the horsepower and usability of that flat six engine, the iconic flat six? Will we make that chassis drive better than anybody ever thought it could? Will we make that 911 silhouette look even better than it already does? Yeah, that'll continue to be our focus on these reimaginations of 911. And I think it'll be way beyond my career that Singer would ever be looking at an autonomous vehicle or an EV vehicle. And
Yeah.
and I think they'll, again, as much as I love EVs and I think they're the great solution, there's nothing like that visceral experience of an internal combustion engine, particularly when you're really on it and getting a chance to stretch it out and enjoy it, particularly in the back of a 911.
You're a curious guy. You've had so many different experiences. Are you learning more and more every day now in your current role than you could have imagined before?
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Um, and I am learning a lot about, um, I used to say that when you're designing and engineering a vehicle, you're often, particularly at Ford and even sometimes at Multimatic, you're designing and engineering for someone else, in that you have a target customer, that explorer target customer. Or even if you're a truck guy, not every F-150 is going to be for you. You might be the Raptor guy, and we're talking about, the on-road guy or the Super Duty guy that's towing. And so you always need to be thinking about designing for them. And that can be hard because often even that customer doesn't know what they want next, right? So we're very lucky at Singer that we're designing for ourselves. Particularly Rob and Maz really know what they want in a 911. They don't always agree, so there's some good discussions between the two. But it's so much fun when you're designing for yourself, and I'm learning so much from those guys and the other people at Singer about. I understood what made a 911 spectacular from an engineering viewpoint, but this emotional connection that people have to 911s, I'm really learning a lot about. And I'm also learning a lot about, beyond the approach to 911s, what it means to have a luxury brand viewpoint while maintaining down to earth accessibility and just down to earth approach to life. And I think that's a little bit of that California vibe in there, but it's especially true in the Singer culture that no one has a clientele that's as ultra high net worth as we do. And yet it's just a very down to earth day-to-day culture in our company. And so, yeah, I'm really learning a lot about that and I'm loving it.
You have stood at the summit of industrial power, and now you're shaping dreams by hand. But you're also reminding us that cars aren't just machines, Raj. They are emotional connections. Thanks for sharing your story. Great to be with you again. We wish you all the best of luck in your latest chapter, and look forward to seeing how Raj is reimagined.
Thanks, Jason. It's really been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you.